Well, welcome everyone to our 2025-2026 on-campus and off-campus housing information. This is our family webinar that we've composed for tonight to help prepare you as family members to know a bit more about how these options proceed at Tulane, what kind of resources there are for students who are considering either option and what the parameters are and the expectations and requirements are for students who live on campus, and then what kind of supports there are for students who are living off campus. So I am very happy to introduce to you our panelists for tonight, who are Esther Benton, who is the Associate Director for Housing Operations in our Housing and Residence Life Department, and Catherine Tyner, who's the Assistant Dean of Students, who is in the Student Resources and Support Services function at Tulane. And all of us are staff members of the Division of Student Affairs at Tulane. So I am now going to turn things over to Esther, who will start things off, and then I'll rejoin you when it's time for the Q&A.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to have you all here tonight. So I wanted to talk about two things tonight that relate to on-campus housing. The first is to touch on our new 3-year live-on requirement. This is a new university requirement that I'll kind of walk through and who's exempt from that, and then also the timeline and process for applying for on-campus housing. So the 3-year live-on requirement is effective this coming fall 25, spring 26 academic year. It applies to students entering their third academic year. It does not apply to transfer and exchange students. And the exemption criteria, if a student believes they could be exempt, is that they have to live with their parents in their parents' permanent address less than 50 miles from campus. They have to be 22 years or older before the first day of classes. They have to be legally married, the legal guardian of a minor, or students studying abroad in the fall of their junior year would be exempt from this requirement. The timeline for this coming year for the housing process, on January 28th, the application opens. And it closes on February 25th. And I say that as a soft close in that we always keep our application open. We're always going to try to help students find housing who need it, or at least give them an option to communicate with us or communicate that need with us. But that February 25th is the deadline if they want to match roommates and get a time slot to sign up during the regular process. March 4th, they will begin roommate matching. And March 18th through the 27th is when we actually do signups. It's done on their portal, but we also are available in person for students to come in to help navigate that process. And we break that out by class year. And then if students are abroad or taking a leave and they're coming back and trying to seek housing, we open a spring-only housing application on November 1st, and that application closes on November 15th. Same like the other one, technically we don't close the application, but that's the deadline for students to be able to get housed with preferred roommates and things like that.
Okay, so thanks, Esther. So I know there are probably questions around if my student is studying abroad in the fall and needs housing in the spring, whether it's on or off campus. And so I wanted to talk through a little about the options we have for off-campus housing and things to consider. So we have this great website. It's offcampushousing.tulane.edu. And we have it set up so it's off-campus housing within 3 miles of the uptown campus and within 3 miles of the downtown campus. So students can do a map map-based housing search. They can also, put things in like filters like I want to be close to public transportation or a grocery store, things like that. It also can be used as a roommate finder. So if students are looking to move off campus and are in need of a roommate or roommates, they can use this as well. Anybody with a Tulane email address can post for free. So if a student, well, if somebody has housing available, they can post it on here, particularly sublet options, and it has a lot of different renter need to know resources. So this is just kind of what the homepage looks like, and you can see housing, roommates, resources, or add a listing. Again, students, faculty, and staff just sign in with their single sign-on credentials, their Tulane credentials, to gain access. Roommate finders, they can look and see who's looking for roommates or housemates. And some folks may already have, a house that they're looking for somebody to be their roommate, or they may be looking for a roommate to start searching for a house. Again, it's map based, so they can choose the uptown campus or the downtown campus. They can also choose specific neighborhoods. So even if it's not within that 3 miles, if they want to live, nearby St. John or by City Park, they can choose those neighborhoods to look. And you can sort by, pricing, bedrooms, bathrooms, building types, a lot of different filters. And then there's these different tabs at the top. So resources on locating houses or apartments, resources on leasing, there's resources on, you know, planning a student budget, things to consider when moving in with a roommate, resources for moving, and then resources for living. So we have a lot of, connections to different New Orleans resources as well. So here are just a few examples. We have a guide of suggested questions to ask landlords when you're doing the roommate search or the housing search, an apartment search checklist. You can use a budget worksheet. There's a variety. This is just a sample. And there's also the Tulane University off-campus living guide, which our Office of Government and Community Relations puts out each fall semester. So things for your students to consider when looking at off-campus housing. One is safety and security. And just as a reminder, our police department is a full-service law enforcement agency that provides police services to our uptown and downtown campuses. They also work very collaboratively with the New Orleans Police Department and, really do a good job of patrolling the uptown and downtown campuses within a 1 mile area. So if your student is living uptown, it's bounded by South Claiborne to Loyola. Downtown South Claiborne to Loyola and Poydras to Canal. And then uptown is Carrollton to Jefferson and River Road or Leak Avenue to Fontainebleau. Another thing TUPD does is they'll offer or perform a security assessment of the apartment or house that your student is looking at. The student does have to have already signed a lease and make sure their landlord is okay with this. But several of the police officers are certified in doing these security assessments, and so they'll go in and do a holistic security assessment of the dwelling and then give you a printed or give the student a printed out report and have some suggestions for increasing security and safety. We also have TUPD escorts that are available. So if a student is, studying late at the library and wants an escort to their home at, 3 in the morning, they can call and request an escort. We also have Tulane Transloc, which is essentially like the Uber of Tulane. So it's on-demand transportation service for our community members. And Uptown service is available from 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. Monday through Sunday. And it's an app that students download through our shuttles and transportation. And again, it's similar to Uber or Lyft. They just go in the app and request that ride. Also thinking about whether on campus or off campus, we highly recommend that our students purchase some form of renter's insurance. And again, this goes for students living in the residence hall as well as students living off campus. Um, a lot of times students may be covered under their parents' insurance policy. So, checking, especially if they're living on campus, but not typically covered when renting a privately owned property off campus. So we always suggest that students check with their family members to see if they are covered on their insurance policy. And if not, than to get renter's insurance. And if you go to this website, which you'll have the link to, there's several resources for students to purchase those policies directly from the insurers. And as Penny mentioned, I listed out a lot of different resources that you'll have the links to. Another one I meant to mention is Everbridge. This is for all community members. It's an app we have, or we all should download on our phones. And it's got a lot of cool functions, including an SOS function. Um, but students can, or staff or faculty, if you are, again, if you're leaving the library late at night and going home, you can go into your Everbridge app and you can share your location and how long it should take you to get where you're going. And if you haven't checked in by that time, or you can use the SOS button, the police department is going to respond to the student to make sure they're okay. We also have TULAP, which is our Tulane University Legal Assistance Program, and we have a criminal attorney and a civil attorney. And Greg Nichols is our civil attorney, and he and the law students that work in the clinic on the civil side are great at, if a student wants to run their lease by them to make sure there's no red flags. They're a really good resource as well. I think, Penny, is that it? Oh, again, there's some different resources. The fire department also does a free smoke alarm installation. So if your students are moving somewhere where there isn't a smoke alarm, they'll come install them for free, or if they want additional smoke alarms. Our trash and recycling schedule for the city, a neighborhood guide, renter's insurance, crime map, all kind of good resources to check out.
Okay, so families, now is the time that you can submit your questions in the Q&A feature of your control panel. And we have a couple of questions already. So Esther, these first two will be addressed to you because they're about housing on campus. Do you guarantee on-campus spring housing for students who go abroad in the fall? And what would the odds be of juniors getting housing in the spring after returning from a fall study abroad
Yes,
program?
great question. Oh, my camera just went blurry. There we go. We don't guarantee housing for students returning from abroad, but we certainly would encourage them to apply if they'd like to have housing. There's no way for us to predict for sure. I can say the last few years I've been able to house students returning from being abroad, but it depends upon the demand for that particular year.
Are there any other questions that people would like to pose? And so just to follow up on that one, so Esther, you had said that the housing application for spring will open November 1, 2025, and would close November 15th. So it would be important for students who are studying abroad to remember that time frame so they can go online to submit that application.
Yes, and that's a great deadline because we never change it. The spring application always opens on November 1st, regardless of what day of the week it is. So that's a set day.
Okay. I would definitely encourage families to look over that the link for TULAP, for our Tulane Legal Assistance Program, because there's a really helpful primer on landlord-tenant relations that was written by the lawyers who have been those paid directors, the full-time directors of the or the not the law students, but the lawyers who are hired by them to oversee everything. It's been written by them, and so it definitely focuses on some of the aspects of typical Louisiana landlord-tenant laws. So that's very helpful for you to know about if you're coming from a different state, which most of our students at Tulane are. So we strongly encourage you to review that with your student before you kind of get into this process. So another question is, you have new dorms for juniors. Is there any way to provide more clarity about the odds? And I think because right now our students haven't applied yet, all of the students who plan to return for fall and spring haven't yet applied, then it's hard to predict those numbers. And there are sometimes students as well who are going to go abroad and they don't plan to live on campus in the spring since they're not required to, correct, Esther? And there might even be students who take a leave of absence or they do some kind of off-campus paid internship in another place and they get a leave of absence or something. And so it's just something that's just not predictable at this point. And we have had new spaces come open as we've built new residence halls. So the dynamics of things have definitely been shifting in the last few years. And students haven't applied for study abroad yet, so we don't know how many students will be in that number at this point. So we wanted to provide this information early enough that you and your student have some time to consider all of these possibilities and help them get prepared and kind of investigate different options and talk with friends and take a look at some of these resources so that they get familiar with them well in advance of when they'll need them. So one comment is that if juniors are returning from a fall study abroad, that may force them to sign a lease starting June 2025 and pay for 6 months of rent for unused occupancy. And so that may be a situation that may be possible if a student wants to kind of have a guarantee that there's a space for them off campus in a lease because they can't always guarantee that they could sublet that to someone else. And so we definitely want people to be aware of that possibility. And before making that commitment with a group of other roommates and signing a lease that does hold them to, all of those months of a year-long lease, to be aware of those things. So it's definitely something for families to consider.
And Penny, what I would say is that's always been the case, right?
Yes.
Like that has nothing to do with this new housing um
Right,
requirement. I mean, students have always, for the most part, studied abroad in the fall. They've signed leases during the summer and they sublet. So, making sure that they are able to sublet, they can post their sublets for free on the housing website. They can post, a lot of students post on few different Facebook pages.
right. And that is just the reality of the uptown apartment market around the campus, is that, the leases are year long and they usually do start June 1, after the students who have graduated or are moving away, finish their studies in May. There's a little bit of time for the landlords to turn over the apartments or have them cleaned or whatever. And then the leases start June 1, whether the students are going to start occupying them June 1 or not. And so even some of the students who are in, on campus full time, in both fall and spring are oftentimes paying for the apartment for the summer just to secure their lease and know that they've already, confirmed that they've got an apartment. And that is just part of the uptown housing market, around our university campus, that the leases run as 12-month leases from June 1 to May 30th usually. So there is a question about whether or not there's much of a market for subleases, since juniors will be living on campus in the fall. And so sometimes the subletters might have been students who are going to be here in the fall but plan to go abroad in the spring, or doing something else in the spring, or graduating early. But that's still kind of a negligible number of people. Sometimes subletters are not students, but it's not all that typical that non-students would want to live in an apartment with, for whom, the rest of the other tenants are Tulane students. So, Esther or Catherine, do you have any other?
Well, I was going to say a lot of Tulane and Loyola students live together too.
Yes, that's true. Yes. So,
I can speak to just, I think, a couple things around this. One, what Kat said is absolutely correct. This is the same situation that it's been for years. But what's going to be different is that we will have more beds for juniors moving forward than we have had in the past. So we're going to have more on-campus beds than we've previously had. And some of those students that may have, be studying abroad, those beds will open up on campus. And so that's going to be a great option. It is not uncommon for me in November to be in communication with students who are planning to return from abroad, who want to live on campus. And I can give them regular updates about the state of how many beds we have and the reality of what that looks like. I talk to students abroad all the time about that when they're getting ready to come back.
okay. So I think that November 1 to November 15 date range is really important to remember. And so checking in with your student like next October to make sure they've got that date on their calendar, and they're going to make sure they get that information in, they make that application if they are interested in living on campus in the spring, is really important. So I'll just make a last call for other questions, if you have those, to submit them. And let's see here. So one question is, what percentage of students go abroad in the spring versus fall? All we would have to kind of work with is, history. That doesn't necessarily mean it would be exactly the same in the future, but Esther, if you have an answer for that.
I don't have an exact number, but I did have the opportunity to spend some time with Study Abroad during Wave Weekend. And they said that the vast majority have chosen to study abroad in the fall previously, and that they would strongly encourage people to consider studying abroad in the spring, that there's more programs and opportunities available during that
Yeah.
time.
And we had a couple of webinars as well for families last month and in October, one on the Freeman Business School study abroad programs, and the other for the ones that are operated out of Newcomb Tulane College. And both recommended that possibility because since historically there have been fewer people studying abroad in the spring, that if a student will consider going abroad in the spring, then there may be more spaces that are available, especially in the business school programs where it's an exchange. So let's see. I guess we have someone here who is a parent of a spring scholar, and that's a different group than we really kind of envisioned for this audience. But do you have an estimate of when the residence hall assignments will be sent to spring scholars who will be joining us in January 25?
Yes, those assignments will go out usually the second week in January, not January, excuse me, in December. Don't panic. And I just want to say every spring scholar is guaranteed housing. They will get a space. We push that a little bit later because we're able to give better placements to spring scholars with other spring scholars and other freshmen and in spaces that they want if we wait till we receive the vast majority of our cancellations.
So again, for other folks on the call, the spring scholars are incoming first year students who are beginning in January rather than, the vast majority of students who join us in August for fall semester. So that's just a different group. So we understand how that question got submitted, but we just want to make sure people aren't confused about that. So here's this might be a repeat question. If the students don't know if they will get accepted to study abroad for junior fall, they should go ahead and sign up for housing and then cancel if they have to. And so Esther is confirming that yes, that's the case.
Yes, we collaborate with Study Abroad, so they send us the list of students who actually are going abroad, and any cancellation fees for students who are actually going abroad would be waived.
And then just to clarify that the spring scholars get housing priority for their very first semester, which is the spring. And that's a priority for them because they're first year students on our campus. And so just like we guarantee housing for all the incoming first year students who start in August for fall, then those brand new students do have a priority when they start in the January of that first semester for them.
Yes, and I would also say there's a little bit of a nuance in that question. So we do a lot of math when the numbers come in to make sure that we're offering spaces to the people that we can. So the priority is given, yes, to spring scholars that they for sure will get housing. But then when we know how many returning upper class students we can give housing to, we house them in upper class spaces with, whatever things we can do for them that they're asking for. If there's a friend they're trying to get back together with or things like that, we try to accomplish those first and try to put as many spring scholars and freshman housing as we can. It's not an exact science, but priority is a tricky term to navigate. Spring scholars are guaranteed. So if that's what we mean by priority, yes. But if we're talking about the spaces or the types of housing, that's a little bit different.
Yeah. Thank you, Esther, for clarifying that nuance. That's helpful. Okay, I'll make another last call for any remaining questions from folks, and I'll just remind everybody on the call that in a day or two, we will email all of you the link to the recording of this, and in an email, we'll send you that video recording link so that if you want to watch any part of this over again, you may, and we'll also give you the PDF of the slide. So it's easy to just go back through these slides, and the slides will have live links in them so you can dive through to the more in-depth content that was mentioned in these different resources. So what I will say is if you think of questions later that you didn't have tonight, or if there was something that I accidentally missed, you can email any questions that are about the on-campus housing to housing@tulane.edu, and that'll get forwarded to Esther. And then if you have any questions about the off-campus things, if they're not answered in those vast resources that we'll have linked in the slides for you, then you can email Catherine at tyner@tulane.edu, and that's tyner@tulane.edu. If you have any general questions or questions about other things and you're not sure who to direct them to, you're always welcome to email those to me at families@tulane.edu. That's families plural @tulane.edu, and I'll forward your questions to the relevant staff member. If you have any feedback about this webinar or suggestions for other webinar topics, I also encourage you to send me any feedback at families@tulane.edu. If you have any short comments now, you can type those in, but otherwise we'll close the webinar.